Hello everyone, welcome to this session on public relations cases. And the idea of designing this session was to bring to you the real-time case studies that have been done in India as well as abroad, the real-time problems that companies have faced and how they have been able to sort it out by means of public relations. So in this session, we will basically look at public relation cases in the light of crisis management, one, and reputation management, the second one. So there could be many more of such kinds, but looking at the kind of time that I have with you for this session, I thought that these are the most important aspects of public relations or why people employ public relations either individually or for a brand. So crisis management cases and reputation management cases were the ones that I thought were the best to discuss. Before I talk about the cases or the case studies of public relations that deal with crisis, let us try and understand what a crisis is. I have talked about what a crisis is in my previous sessions. Here I will just detail it a little for you. So when an unprecedented situation occurs or an unexpected problem puts the stability of an organization at risk or at stake, such kind of a situation is called crisis. So what is essential is it should be an unprecedented situation. It should not be expected. And there is a greater possibility that because of this situation, this organization will be seen in a bad light, in a negative light, or will have repercussions on its sales, on its identity, on the, the kind of perception that people have about it. So this kind of a situation will put the stability of an organization at risk or at stake. This situation is called a crisis situation. So what will happen as a result of this? One, there will be an imminent threat to the organization. Like I just said, in terms of profit, in terms of its marketability, in terms of its shares, in terms of its identity, in terms of its reputation, everything that you can identify with a business entity which is existing in a social setup will get hampered here. There will be a threat to it. Two, the situation will surprise or shock. Why? Because it is totally unexpected. It is unprecedented. There was no way of knowing that this kind of a thing can happen. So ideally, this situation will surprise or shock both the company as well as the various entities that are connected to it, as well as the various publics that exist. There has to be a need for timely and effective decisions. What a crisis calls for is not to hide, but rather be transparent about facts and if need be, own up things. And what is most important is that there has to be timely and effective decision pertaining to what has happened, how it can be improved, how we can compensate for it, or how we can do some damage control for it. All those aspects come under the need for timely and effective decisions that are being made in that kind of a situation. So what people usually do is they set up a media cell. Say for example, an oil company, and they have had a fire on a huge scale which has created a lot of ruckus, politically also, socially also, and there has been a lot of damage. In such kind of a case, the first thing that one must do is set up a media cell which will give timely information to the press, to those who have been impacted, the employees, and everyone else, all the stakeholders who are involved. The information that is given out, one, should be latest, two, you must be very transparent. Because there have been a number of times that people have tried to hide facts which have later come out, and the result of this has been blatant for the organization. So one must try to be as transparent as possible. Now let us look at these case studies. Samsung, we all know Samsung, amongst all the other verticals that it has, it also makes phones. Now what was the crisis? The crisis was that after 3 million devices of Samsung Galaxy Note 7 were sold, there were reports of overheating of the device and exploding batteries. So you can well imagine a brand like Samsung, the kind of credibility it enjoys in the eyes of the customers in the market, the kind of market share it has when we talk about Android phones, is a big deal. So this was a huge crisis that was staring in the face of Samsung company. So what was the response? One, there was a global recall of 2.5 million phones. There were 3 million sold out. There was a call for getting the devices back, and 2.5 million phones came back. They also discontinued the production and sale of this model totally. Now you can imagine the kind of losses an organization as big as Samsung and as popular as Samsung would have faced because of discontinued production and sale. But nevertheless, they did it. Why? Because it was important at that time to be able to save whatever little reputation was left. New test lab was built with 700 researchers and 2 lakh devices. So there were 2 lakh devices that were brought down to this lab for testing, and 700 technical experts and researchers were given the job of testing it. There was a separate, since the batteries were exploding due to overheating, there was a separate battery advisory group that was created in Samsung, which today works on all models of it. All processes were given a boost completely. All processes which were involved in production of phones were given a boost. And it was ensured that the next product that Samsung doled out was the company's most highly tested one. And they had put the customers first. They did not look so much into their own losses that they would be incurring, but reputation at this time was at stake. And it was important for this organization to save upon their reputation first by putting the customers first. It is all right, customers do take in the fact that an organization can go wrong, anybody can go wrong. But at the same time, if you make an honest effort to make some damage control, to see to it that corrections are made, and to own up mistakes, I think the market usually forgives you. The next in the list was Nestle Maggi noodles. A very, very popular crisis that they suffered with was that the noodles contained lead. We all know that lead in food in any form can be cancerous. So ideally the crisis was that the noodles contained lead. Now what was the response? What was the actuality? The actuality was that the soil and water in India on its own contains certain level of lead, and this is above the permissible level, which is the permissible level as per health concerns. And the same water and soil gets used when this product is getting manufactured, because Maggi, the production units of Maggi noodles are all over in India. So the response was, one, smart use of social media. And of course, every brand, what they've invariably done is, in order to initiate damage control, they always put their customers first. So smartphones, the smart use of social media meant that on the basis of social media platforms, by making use of them, they smartly communicated. Now that communication can be of various types. This communication could be in the form of an apology, plus what the company is proposing to do for this problem and how people's health will be not affected in future. So there was a smart use of social media whereby communication campaigning was done to see to it that the confidence is rebuilt in this brand and people come back for purchase of Maggi once more. They put the customers first, and a very impressive effort was done to respond to every tweet from customers. So they made a huge back-end team whereby whenever there would be a tweet from customers from any section of the society, they would retweet, they would respond, and they were already, there were fixed ways of how they would be responding to it. And this was a huge, magnanimous, impressive effort which was made by this concern. They explained in simple language so that the layman would be able to understand. When you're trying to talk about lead, half the population wouldn't even understand how lead harms your health. And then how does lead enter the food? How does the lead enter Maggi? And then they made an effort to explain it to the layman in the simplest possible manner so that they would understand, so that the faith, the trust in the brand would continue to be. And then they reassured and they informed and explained. Reassurance at such a time is very important. Why? Because see, when it comes to food, health is the most important thing. People do not overlook if something goes wrong with what they eat. So anything which has more to do with pizzas or more to do with Maggie or anything that they're eating is something they would be more concerned about as compared to anything else. So the reassurance works best along with information and explanation. So the idea was to explain that lead occurred naturally in soil and water. Of course, when you talk about eating Maggie, there are other harms that are there, but it is not the lead part which is the more important one. But what was highlighted as a part of this crisis was that it has more than the permissible levels of lead in it. So that is leading to cancer in people. So the brand, because they could maintain an impressive social media response, they were open with answering questions, they tried to make it as transparent as possible, and then they tried to bring the facts to the layman by helping them understand and learn and appreciate the fact that it is not the company's fault, it is not the organization's, the brand's fault. The result was that the brand climbed back to 50%, 57% of its market share again. So it is again back in the market. The third, and of course this too is a case study that all of you must be knowing about very well, was about Cadbury chocolate. The crisis was infestation. There was infestation found in Cadbury Dairy Milk. So worms were found in bars of chocolate. And the time when this was found was almost around the festival season. And we all know that for the past 8 to 10 years, chocolates and their brands have projected themselves as an alternative to the Indian sweets, the traditional sweets, especially in times of Diwali and Holi, Raksha Bandhan, New Year's, so on and so forth. So ideally, the crisis came at a time when it was festival time and the sales got hit. What was the brand's response? The first thing was that they invested around 15 crore INR in improving the machinery. The machinery that was being used so far was not up to the grade, and now they got imported machinery to produce chocolates. Next, they revamped the packaging. There is always an option of, this is something that we also see in locally made foods, that the way they are packaged helps the worms to enter in them. So they revamped the packaging completely, and what you find today these days is the metallic polyflow. That is the kind of packaging that they use for chocolates today. So much so that the chocolate does not need to have a second layer of coating, second layer of cover, other than this metallic polyflow packaging. Of course, due to this metallic polyflow packaging, it became costlier for the company. The cost of the product rose up by 10 to 15%, but Cadbury made no price hike. So this of course won the hearts of the people because they could see the improvement in the product itself and how it was being monitored cautiously, how it was being produced and distributed properly, and how it was finally reaching the customer without any further price hike. The increased investment in packaging, media campaigns and retailer outreach programs gave them a good head start because things had fallen flat when it came to infestation of the bars of chocolate. So the investment was made in packaging about this polyflow. Then there were greater media campaigns explaining the situation, apologizing and saying that we are doing it better, we are doing everything possible which is in our hands to see that the situation does not get repeated. And at the same time, there were more retailer outreach programs. It is important to keep your retailers and wholesalers in confidence. Why? Because these are the people who are in direct touch with the consumer. They are the ones who will push your product to the consumer. And these are the people who will explain that, okay, we've had this accidentally, but then this is not the case anymore and it has improved upon it. You should go ahead and try. So these are the ones who are persuading as well. So retailer outreach programs in such cases is of large importance. And of course, they roped in the film star Amitabh Bachchan as their brand ambassador, and the war with worms was won. So you look in totality how the brand approached the entire situation. What kind of various responses and the response mechanisms they built and they came up with in order to ascertain that people do not feel left out, people do not feel cheated, their trust in the brand does not go away. And today we know that Cadbury again is doing very well and it has a good market share. So this is how they won this war with worms. The next famous case is the Coca Cola case. The crisis was that a press release was issued way back in 2003 by the Center for Science and Environment, we call it CSE for short, and it stated that 12 major cold drink brands sold in and around Delhi had a deadly cocktail of pesticide residues. Then onwards, Coca Cola, Pepsi and all these various soft drinks have been resonated to be pesticidal in nature. And largely for those people who are opposed to drinking soft drinks, call it pesticide. Now this was a huge dent in the reputation and the market shares came down. How did the brand respond to it? One was they ran media campaigns in rural as well as urban areas. Now soft drinks are something which are more of a luxury when it comes to rural areas. The rural belt considers it something which is more city-like and hence more luxurious. So they started providing small bottles for half the price because ruralites found it expensive. Through this they also increased their sales, and while all the time they were running media campaigns in both rural as well as urban belts, these media campaigns focused on how this is fine as a drink to have and it does not contain pesticides. So this is how they worked on their market share and how the business improved. And Coca-Cola, though the dent was such that it has not come back to its usual levels, nevertheless it was able to recover very well from the crisis. So on the whole, what we see is how public relations or how effective communication, when you design it properly, effectively, professionally, keeping all the necessary details in mind, how an organization which is almost drowned, which has lost its market share, which has lost its audiences, can also bounce back. So all these 4-5 case studies have been on crisis management. Now let us talk about reputation management. When I say reputation, what does it entail? Reputation is how people view you. How your target audience, in what light does it look at you? What do they think about you? What do they think you would be like or you would react to, or what is it that the values will get transferred to them once they're using your product or service or are in direct touch with your brand. So ideally reputation management is again an important function of public relations, an important section of persuasive communication. And here today, in today's context, we talk more in terms of social media. So we talk about things like blogs, we talk about e-newsletters. Newsletters earlier were not in the electronic format. These days there are only e-newsletters and brochures and catalogs, various kinds of material. The social media, all concerns today have a Facebook page, they have a Twitter handle, they have other media platforms on which they interact, and of course the video content. Time and again, in the form of corporate social responsibility, in the form of a mark for their reputation, they release certain videos which carry social messages. So videos are also one ways of one of the things that we would look at when we are talking about reputation management. Now of late would be from the time of 2005, there was a new economic policy which said that every profit-making organization must invest 1% of its total profit annually into corporate social responsibility. When I say corporate social responsibility, there were a few activities that were listed under it. A huge list of activities was listed. And this is what this profit-making organization, since it is drawing so much from the society, this is their way of giving back. And it was made mandatory for everybody to be investing 1% of their profit into CSR, corporate social responsibility. So this again, of course, this came as a rule, but at the end of it, it has not just benefited the society, it has also added to the reputation of the organization. So, while we are looking at reputation management in terms of social media and e-content, videos, blogs, newsletters, catalogs and all, we are also looking at the overall activities, the strength that corporate social responsibility is giving to any organization and adding to its reputation. So, the first important thing is strategic content building. If we are looking at social media, of course there is traditional media as well. Why I am focusing on social media is because the case study that I have here, which I will be discussing with you, is largely based on social media. So, strategic content building is important. You need to figure out what kind of content you are building for what kind of audience. I just told the details of it while I was discussing in my previous session about public relation campaigns. So, it is important to understand why content should be strategic. Say for example, if in a rural belt you are going for awareness regarding any health concern, say polio. So, you first need to test what is the already existing level of knowledge that people in this belt have. Because if you start from the scratch and they already have certain level of knowledge, then this effort of going from the scratch to that level gets wasted. So, the first thing is you must test what is their existing knowledge level and how much of it is true and false, because there can be misnomers related to anything. And then how does it proceed further? All of it should be very strategic. Also, like an audience which is there in front of you, you need to figure out when are they in a state of accepting the maximum communication. So, strategic content is important from that point of view. Content should not only be made from the point of view of the audience, it should also match the level, the IQ, the understandability of the audiences. It should also match up with the norms, the culture, the belief system that these people have, and it should also be able to measure up. You know, you go from 0 to 10, you do not really proceed from 7 to 10. So, it should be very strategic. You should give the basics first and then get on to the advanced level, so on and so forth. So, the content building has to be looked into from the strategy point of view. And then of course, the strategy also includes what is the end term benefit that you are looking at as an organization. Is it a change in the way people view you? Is it increase in sales? Is it something else? Your reputation, your image, corporate personality? What is it that you are looking at? That is important to understand and accordingly plan the strategic communication. Then of course, when we are talking about strategic content, there is also strategic public relations. Strategic content would also mean, say for example, the end term is the same, changing or maintaining the reputation of an organization. But for that you are making use of, say for example, a documentary as well as an advertisement and some additional publicity material. So, while the objective is the same, the strategy with which these three blend with each other and not just blend, on their own individually, the kind of engagement and interaction they provide to the target audience is equally important. So, this is why we say that content building necessarily has to be strategic. Since content is strategic, public relations automatically will be strategic, because public relations is not only the content, not only the piece of communication, it is the handling of this communication, it is the way, the timing, the acceptability, the right framework of the audience so that they accept your communication in the best possible positive way is also important. So, that is strategy in public relations, and then it involves all those factors which I have talked about in my earlier sessions, right from identifying the goals, specifying your target audience, selecting the right media to reach the people. So, alternative media is also being made use of on a large scale. So, all of it together accounts to strategic public relations. So, first we spoke of strategic content building, then we are talking about strategic public relations. The next is influence marketing. Now, influence marketing is something which is slightly new, though not very new, it has been around for a few years now, whereby opinion leaders become important. Opinion leaders are those people who will have an opinion about your brand or your product or your verticals, and this is the opinion which will flow down to the opinion followers. So when we were discussing our media theories, we were talking about the two-step and multi-step flow of information from opinion leaders to opinion followers. This is a similar case. So influence marketing is, say for example, there can be one person who can be an influencer when it comes to knowledge about, for example, Ayurveda or homeopathy or something else, fashion trends. So this person will have a lot of followers. These can be, Bollywood stars as well. These can be doctors as well. These can be fashion designers, anybody for that matter. So these are the people who are influencing all of them who are following them on social media. So these are called influencers, also called opinion leaders. So influence marketing is also one way whereby you get these opinion leaders to talk about your product. And when they're talking about the product in a positive tone, about using it, about how it is better in features and usage and it will provide a better experience to the users, obviously all those people who are following can get influenced by this opinion. So this is the new thing which is called influence marketing. This is also very helpful in reputation management. Now I will share this case study with you which is about Ariel, and it is not a very old case study, it is a very recent one, and the entire campaign was about share the load. We know that Ariel is a detergent. Now when it is talking about share the load, instead of talking about the product that it has or the brand that it is or the exclusive features of this brand or how it can one up the market, all those things it did not talk about. It took up the social issue, and the social issue was gender equality. So they were constantly talking about gender equality in their campaign while the product was already obviously and all the time it was there in the background. Now let us look at what they did. The target audience for this campaign was everyone. Like I told you in my initial session, the target audience can be segmented as well as general audience. In this case it was general audience, men, women, children, young, old, everybody. The facts presented were not brand related but gender equality related, like 61% men feel too tired to take up household chores after work, and 68% women do laundry after work regularly. So this is something that they found from the market research that they conducted, from the research reports they had, and so this was the fact. Now how did they intertwine the emotion with it? I taught my daughter to be independent, but I did not teach my son to lend a hand. So this is the emotional aspect with it. They knew very well that the emotional aspect would tick with all audiences innumerably, because this is the kind of social setup today where everybody, even in the rural background, women are open to working in India, and a large number of women do work, and there is no equality in terms that a woman other than her household responsibilities has been given the burden of work as well. So despite the fact that we talked about gender equality and we are teaching our girls to, be well read and get the right degrees and get good grades and make themselves something in the world today, there is no equality still. Why? Because we have not taught our boys to share the load of the household. That is what the fact presented, and this is the kind of emotion that it was dealing with. So how they inbuilt their product was that the laundry came to represent almost all kinds of household work that was there. So the first thing was laundry goes odd even. We all know that in Delhi, the capital city of India, there was this odd even way of check, a pollution check that was kept, whereby the cars which had number plates with odd numbers would get out on certain days and even numbers would get out on alternate days. So the laundry, Airtel also projected itself in an odd even manner. So there was even Ariel pack which came with an odd even calendar, whereby it would be demarcated that all the odd days the men would do the laundry and all the even days women would do the laundry after work. So this was the odd even, this was the first phase of it. Of course, there was also offline engagement. So they did not neglect the traditional media. They did make use of television, they did make use of YouTube, events, photo booths, information boards, all of them together. So televisions largely carried TVCs, the television commercials carried messages of gender equality. YouTube had some cartoons on them which talked about how gender equality is important and how one should share the load. There were also events that were organized, and the photo booths were there whereby people, general people would come in, they would check in the booths and they would get clicked and they would show their support for gender equality. And there were information boards. Information that talked about gender equality, information that talked about why it is important to share the load. So the entire campaign was called Share the Load campaign. Also, like I just told you, bloggers and influencers were involved. These were the people who were talking about gender equality, and they were also referencing to this campaign that Ariel was carrying out, and that is what led to the maximum the flow on the website, in a way that maximum people got attracted to it and they responded to it, they participated in those events. The social impact was a huge hit. So because it was largely released, other than of course the offline engagement that they made with TV and YouTube and other things, the social impact came to be a huge hit. And the brand was seen as an entity, as a personality that was fighting for a social cause and was not just making profits. So ideally, this is how the brand can improve upon its reputation from just being a profit-making entity to something which will serve a social cause. They did not lose their product in the meantime. They were smart. They did not lose the product, and laundry became symbolic of all the household chores. There are so many other chores that we have in the household, like cooking, like cleaning, like so many other things. But laundry, since they were a detergent making company, laundry came to depict almost all the household chores that are there. And in the audience consciousness, what happened? One, the audiences started thinking that Ariel is not a product, it's a cause. And two, there was a greater feeling of empowerment that this brand connected itself to. So this was a very smart move at reputation management. When I talk about audience consciousness, this is something which is not a voluntary decision. With time, with your exposure to certain kinds of communication on which you may not really have a control, certain kind of things or certain kind of perceptions differ from what they were initially. So with time, these perceptions keep changing. So this consciousness, this exposure to these kind of things will make you realize that this entity stands for something bigger than just profit making. So this is called audience consciousness. In audience consciousness, Ariel was not like one of the other detergents. Now it was not just a product, it was a cause. And there was a greater feeling of empowerment, greater feeling of gender equality that was associated to it. So that is all with our session today on the case studies of public relations, and I hope you've enjoyed all these sessions of public relations whereby we've not just dealt with the theoretical aspects of it, we've also dealt with planning of campaigns of public relations as well as the case studies of it. Hope you've learned enough from it. Thank you very much. Think creative, think PR. See you again.